She looks more like the help than family. I heard my daughter whisper that as I stood by the kitchen entrance, tray in hand, sweat clinging to my back. I stood still, pretending not to hear, pretending I was too busy balancing a tray of champagne flutes. The waiter next to me flinched when she said it, eyes darting to me, but I didn't flinch. I didn't move. My name is Martha. I'm 68 years old. And today was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. My only daughter, Lacey, was getting married. The venue was elegant, the flowers were perfect, and I had paid for every last detail with the money I had saved for over 2 decades. I even sold the Buick Robert left me just to cover the catering upgrade Lacey wanted. She said the filet mignon needed to be Wagyu. I didn't even know what Wagyu was until I Googled it. I'd asked her weeks ago about seating arrangements. She said, "Don't worry, Mom. We've got something special planned for you." This must have been it. The kitchen. When I arrived at the venue this morning, one of the event staff handed me a lanyard instead of a corsage. Kitchen liaison staff access. I thought it was a mix-up. I laughed politely and asked if she meant mother of the bride. She blinked confused. "This is what I was told to give you, ma'am." Before I could ask more, Lacey swept in, radiant in her dress, kissed my cheek lightly and said, "I'm so glad you're here, Mom. We'll catch up later, okay?" Then she was gone, off to do photos with the groomsmen, her bridesmaids, her in-laws. Everyone except me. I was ushered into the kitchen where I was told my job was to keep the caterers on schedule and help manage champagne refills. It was phrased like a request, but something about the way the staff looked at me, half pity, half confusion, told me it was an order. I didn't cause a scene. I just nodded, rolled up the sleeves of my pale blue silk blouse, and got to work. I watched as guests filled the ballroom, sat under chandeliers I had paid for, toasted with glasses I'd rented, and smiled for cameras I'd hired. My place was by the swinging kitchen door, where I could catch flashes of the life I thought I belonged to, and then I heard it. "Better to keep her in the back. She makes everything about her." That was Lacey's voice. Sharp, clear, and soaked in something I hadn't heard from her in years. Contempt. She was talking to her maid of honor, a tall blonde girl named Brooke who always wore dresses too tight and smiles too wide. Brooke laughed. "At least she's useful now." My knees almost gave out, but I steadied myself against the countertop. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just turned back to the tray and made sure every glass had the same level of champagne. Precision gave me dignity. That's what I told myself. I kept my eyes low but my ears open. Every passing conversation chipped away at the mother I thought I had been. Someone said I was lucky to still be invited at all. Another guest asked why the mother of the bride wasn't at the main table. The answer came softly. She insisted on helping. She likes to feel important. Lies spread so smoothly at weddings. Butter on toast. I wondered when Lacey stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as an inconvenience. Maybe it was after Robert passed, when I moved into the smaller house and started clipping coupons. Maybe it was when she met Caleb, whose parents hosted fundraisers and drove Teslas. Maybe it was always. I thought back to her 3rd birthday when she cried because her cake was pink instead of purple. I stayed up that night baking a new one just to see her smile. And now, 31 years later, she locked me in the back of her fairy tale to keep her narrative pretty. My back ached, my feet throbbed, and my chest felt like it had swallowed a brick. But still I didn't leave. Not yet. I had one more job to do before I disappeared. The kitchen smelled like garlic and melted butter, but I could barely taste the air. I kept busy. That is what women like me are taught to do. Fold the napkins, refill the glasses, clear the trays. I had given birth to the bride, but I was treated like a silent part of the staff. The hours blurred. My watch ticked past 5. The ceremony had ended. Now the reception was in full swing. Lacey and Caleb were taking their first dance on a floor I had paid to have waxed that very morning. I leaned against the cooler, wiping my hands on a cloth napkin that still smelled faintly of roses. Outside the kitchen, a cheer erupted as someone gave a speech. I did not go look. I knew I would not be in it. A young busboy named Eric passed by me with a stack of dishes. He paused. "Ma'am, are you sure you are supposed to be in here?" I nodded. "Positive." He gave me a sympathetic look and kept moving. Even he knew something was not right. I took another tray of shrimp puffs and headed toward the servers. Halfway through the swinging door, I heard my daughter's laughter, light, polished, a sound rehearsed for photographs. I paused just inside the doorway unseen and watched her raise a glass. She looked stunning. A vision in lace and pearls, her makeup flawless, her posture poised. I had sewn her first pageant dress by hand. I remembered threading beads by the dim kitchen light while she napped on the couch. She never knew how tired I was back then. She just assumed I could do anything. And I did. For her. Always for her. But somewhere along the way Lacey stopped needing me, and then she stopped wanting me. I turned back into the kitchen, the sound of music following me like perfume I had not asked to wear. I needed a moment, so I stepped outside through the back door. The air was cool, heavy with early evening humidity. I sat on an overturned crate near the dumpsters, careful not to stain my dress. I still had not eaten. My stomach had stopped asking. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, dry, a little red from carrying trays. I used to have hands people admired. Now they just held silence. The kitchen door opened and Natalie, one of the waitresses, stepped out. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, I am sorry, ma'am. I did not know anyone was out here." I nodded. "No need to apologize." She hesitated. "You are her mom, right? The bride?" I nodded again. She bit her lip. "I just wanted to say, I think what they are doing is messed up. You should be out there. At the table. Not back here." I gave a small smile. "That is kind of you." She looked down. "My mom died when I was 16. I would give anything to have her at my wedding someday." Then she slipped back inside, leaving the door to creak behind her. I sat there for another minute, maybe more. Something had settled in my chest. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked back inside. The party was still going. Toasts, dancing, laughter. No one noticed me by the kitchen door. No one turned to see the mother of the bride watching from behind a cart of used glassware. I walked to the back hallway where the bridal suite was. I still had her gift in my purse, a small velvet box with earrings she once admired in a catalog. I left the box on the vanity, next to her bouquet. And then I walked down the hallway, past the restrooms, through the employee exit, and out into the night. The parking lot lights buzzed above me. My car was parked in the furthest corner, behind the delivery van. I did not cry. I did not even sigh. I simply placed the staff lanyard on the dashboard, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away. The drive home was quiet. No music, no talk radio. Just the hum of the tires on asphalt, and the steady rhythm of my thoughts. The wedding had ended hours ago, but I could still feel the weight of the lanyard around my neck. I kept replaying little moments. Not the speeches or the dancing, I had missed all that. But the way Lacey had kissed her new mother-in-law's cheek so sweetly. The way she laughed when Caleb's father gave his toast. That smile. I had not seen that smile directed at me in years. I pulled into my driveway slowly. The porch light was on just as I had left it. My house looked the same, but something in me had shifted. I stepped inside and set my purse down on the table, next to a half-full mug of cold tea I had abandoned that morning. My heels came off with a soft thud, and I stood there for a moment, still in my dress, surrounded by silence. I walked into the living room. The bouquet I had planned to bring to the wedding sat untouched on the coffee table. Pale yellow roses, white lilies, baby's breath. I had even tied a blue ribbon around the stems. Something borrowed, something blue. I picked it up, stared at it, then gently laid it down. I did not need it anymore. I wandered to the bookshelf and reached for the photo album that lived on the second shelf, right below the dusty Bible Robert's mother had given us on our wedding day. I sat down and opened the album. Lacey's baby pictures stared back at me. Her first birthday cake on her cheeks, one tooth showing. Her first day of school. Missing her 2 front teeth and clutching her lunchbox like it held treasure. Halloween costumes, school recitals, awkward teenage smiles with braces. I flipped each page slowly. I had documented everything. And now I could not remember the last time she had looked at me like I mattered. I closed the book and rested my hand on the cover. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I realized I had not spoken out loud in hours. I stood and moved to the kitchen. I made a cup of chamomile tea and took it out to the porch. The night air had cooled. Crickets chirped in the bushes. A dog barked somewhere down the block. I sat in the old rocking chair Robert had built before Lacey was born. Creaked the same way it always had. I took a sip of tea and let the warmth settle in my chest. That is when I heard the buzz. My phone. I went inside and checked the screen. One new message. It was from Diane, my sister. Just got home. Are you okay? I looked for you during the father-daughter dance. Call me. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the screen, then set the phone back down. I did not want to explain tonight. Maybe not ever. I returned to the porch and rocked slowly. The tea was almost gone. In the distance, I could see the lights of another wedding venue across the lake. Music drifted through the trees. I wondered if another mother was sitting in the kitchen there, wearing pearls and wondering when she had become invisible. I wondered if she had smiled through the pain like I had. I wondered if she had decided, like I was starting to, that love should not have to beg to be seen. The next morning the sunlight poured through the curtains like it always did, soft and golden, touching the hardwood floors I had polished every spring since Robert passed. I sat at the edge of the bed, still in my nightgown, holding a single earring in my hand. It was one of the pair I had meant to give Lacey, the ones from the catalog, the ones she had circled years ago and said, maybe one day. I had bought them that same year, tucking them away until a moment felt right. A wedding day had seemed like the perfect one. But now one earring remained in my jewelry dish. I had left the other in the bridal suite, hoping it might mean something. Hoping she might see it and remember me not just as the woman who wrote checks, but as the one who had walked beside her since she took her first steps. I went downstairs and made coffee, letting the kettle whistle longer than necessary. The house was still. I moved through it like a shadow. I opened the curtains in the living room and stared out at the hydrangeas blooming in the yard. Robert had planted those. He said they reminded him of summers in Maine. I remembered the way he used to lean into the window frame with a cup of coffee in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Sometimes he would hum. Sometimes he would just stand there quietly, the corners of his mouth turned up in that way only I recognized. I had not heard anyone hum in this house since he died. I opened the drawer beneath the phone and pulled out a stack of letters. Old ones. Birthday cards Lacey had drawn in crayon. I love you more than pancakes, one said, with a crooked heart and a smiling sun. Another had a stick figure drawing of the two of us holding hands in front of a lopsided house. I kept flipping. High school notes, college emails printed and saved. Even a note she left on the fridge once. Dinner in the microwave. Love you, Mom. I had stored all of it. Proof that once I mattered. That once she looked for me in the crowd. I walked to the garage and stood in front of the storage shelf. There was a box labeled Lacey Baby. I had not opened it in years. I pulled it down carefully and set it on the workbench. Inside were her first shoes, a lock of hair, the hospital bracelet with my name and hers, still curled and yellowed with time. I lifted a tiny cardigan I had knit while I was pregnant, each stitch made while listening to the rhythm of her heartbeat during those long doctor visits. I ran my fingers along the soft yarn. I used to believe that kind of love would be enough. That if you poured every ounce of yourself into someone, they would carry that warmth with them forever. But people change. And sometimes they outgrow the very hands that held them. I packed the box again slowly, sealing it shut with new tape. I stood still for a moment, hands resting on the lid. The silence in the garage felt heavier than the box. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Lacey. Just 3 words. Are you home? I stared at the screen, wondering which version of her had sent it. The daughter who used to write me love notes on construction paper, or the bride who whispered that I belonged in the kitchen. I did not answer right away. I made my way back inside, brewed another cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table where so many birthday candles had been blown out. I watched the steam rise, thin and quiet. I would reply. But not yet. Some silences need to stretch before the truth can walk through them. It was nearly noon before I finally responded. I typed slowly, erased twice, then sent. Yes. I am home. No punctuation. No invitation. Just a fact. 5 minutes later I heard tires on gravel. I looked out the window. Lacey's car. She stepped out alone, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater. No makeup. No camera-ready smile. Just my daughter. She hesitated at the edge of the driveway like a guest unsure if they were welcome. I did not move to the door. I waited. Eventually she rang the bell. I opened it and stepped aside. She entered without a word, glancing around like the house had changed. But it had not. Only we had. I was not sure if you would want to see me, she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I nodded toward the kitchen. I made coffee. She followed me in and sat at the table like she had done 100 times before. I poured us both a cup and sat across from her. The silence between us was not tense. It was tired, worn out from holding everything neither of us had said. She wrapped her hands around the mug. I found the earring, she said. It was in the bridal suite. I nodded. It was meant to be a gift. She looked down. I know. More silence. Then she said it. I am sorry. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just 2 words that sounded heavier coming from her than all the toasts from the night before. It was not supposed to go that way, she continued. I thought. I do not know what I thought. Maybe I just wanted everything to look a certain way. To feel effortless. Polished. She laughed, but it sounded like a cough. You have never been polished, Mom. You have always been real. And I think I was ashamed of that. I stirred my coffee slowly. You were not ashamed when I stood in line at 3 in the morning for dance recital tickets. Or when I stayed up sewing your pageant dresses. Her eyes shimmered. I know. I know you have always been there. And I treated you like background noise. She paused. I heard what Natalie said to you. One of the servers told me. That caught me off guard. I looked up. Which part? Lacey looked like she wanted to shrink. She said you should not be back there. That it was cruel. And she was right. I took a breath and set my spoon down. You cannot undo it, Lacey. You cannot unseat someone at their own daughter's wedding. I know, she whispered. But maybe I can start. Something. A repair. If you will let me. I stared at her. For a long time. She looked like the child I used to carry lost in a world too big. I did not say yes. I did not say no. Instead, I stood and walked to the living room. I picked up the old photo album and brought it back. I laid it in front of her. If you want to understand who I am, I said, start here. She opened the first page. There we were. Her, covered in frosting. Me in a faded sweatshirt smiling through exhaustion. She kept turning. The pages slower with each one. Her shoulders softened. Her fingers lingered on certain pictures. And for the first time in a very long time Lacey looked at me, not through me. Not past me. At me. The way a daughter looks at the woman who taught her how to walk, how to wait, how to forgive. Outside the wind stirred the trees. Inside the quiet began to shift. Not gone, but lighter. Like something had been set down. Finally, Lacey stayed for lunch. Nothing fancy. Just tomato soup and grilled cheese the way she used to like it after school. She offered to help in the kitchen, and for a moment I almost said no out of habit. But then I handed her a knife and said, slice the tomatoes. We moved slowly around each other, like dancers relearning a familiar routine. There were no dramatic apologies, no sudden embraces, just quiet cooperation. I set the table for 2. She brought over the plates. I noticed she placed my glass on a coaster the way Robert always used to. After lunch she wandered through the living room, touching framed photos and trinkets she had not asked about in years. You still have the music box, she said, picking it up. Of course I do, I replied. You broke the dancer's leg when you were 5. She has been spinning crooked ever since. Lacey laughed and the sound was different this time, real. Not curated for someone else's approval. We spent the afternoon sorting through the attic. Not because it needed cleaning but because the space had memories tucked into every corner, and I think she needed to walk through them. I watched her open boxes of baby clothes, holiday ornaments, handmade cards. She found the felt heart she made in 2nd grade. The one with crooked stitches and the word Mom written in glitter glue. I cannot believe you kept all of this, she said, voice thick. You were always the center of everything, I said. Even when you stopped noticing. She closed the box gently. I want to come back next Sunday, she said. Maybe help with the yard. Or cook dinner. I nodded. If you do bring Caleb. Her eyes widened slightly. Are you sure? He is part of you now, I said. And if we are rebuilding, the foundation needs all its pieces. She smiled. He was confused. You? No. He asked why you were not at the head table. I told him you wanted to help in the kitchen. I lied. I stirred my tea. You thought that lie would hurt less than the truth. She nodded. It did not. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows across the porch. She stood in the doorway, purse over her shoulder, unsure whether to hug me or wave. I took the decision from her and pulled her into a soft embrace. She held on longer than I expected. When she pulled back, her eyes were glassy. Thank you, she whispered. For lunch? I asked. For everything, she said. And for not slamming the door. I watched her walk to the car. She paused before getting in, as if memorizing the house she had once called home but had not truly seen in years. I stood in the doorway long after she had driven away. The sky had turned the color of faded lilac. The hydrangeas nodded in the breeze. I thought about the silence that used to live here, and how it had begun to shift. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had started. That night I sat in the rocking chair again, music box on my lap. I turned the key and listened to the tune. Slightly off, a little wobbly but still beautiful. Like most things worth keeping. The following Sunday arrived with a breeze that smelled faintly of cut grass and warm earth. I woke up early and opened the windows, letting the air move through the rooms like a quiet guest. I set 2 extra plates at the table, not out of certainty but out of hope. At exactly noon, Lacey's car pulled into the driveway. Caleb was with her. He stepped out holding a small paper bag. Lacey carried a bouquet of sunflowers, wrapped in brown paper. For your table, she said. I placed them in the old ceramic vase Robert had made in college. One of the handles was chipped, but I had never replaced it. Flaws made things easier to love, not harder. Caleb was polite, maybe nervous. He complimented the porch swing. Lacey gave him a glance that said, "Be normal," and I smiled quietly to myself. We sat in the kitchen drinking iced tea while the chicken baked in the oven. Caleb asked questions about the house, when it was built, what kind of wood the floors were. He seemed genuinely curious. I told him about the time Lacey painted her bedroom door with nail polish at age 12. Lacey groaned and buried her face in her hands. It took 3 weeks to get the smell out, I added. Caleb laughed. The kind of laugh that tells you a person knows how to listen. We ate lunch without rush. Afterward, I brought out a peach cobbler I had made the night before. Is this the one with nutmeg? Lacey asked. I nodded. The same. She closed her eyes after the first bite. This tastes like 5th grade summer. Caleb offered to do the dishes and Lacey joined him. I sat at the kitchen table, listening to their voices blend over the sound of running water. Something in me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the beginning of space where it might live someday. Later we walked through the backyard. I pointed out the garden bed that Robert had built, now overgrown but still proud. We could help you fix that up, Lacey said. We have weekends free for a while. I nodded. Tomatoes do better when they are not alone. She looked at me, understanding what I meant. When they left, the hug at the doorway was warmer. Familiar. Not rushed or rehearsed. Caleb thanked me genuinely. I stood on the porch as they drove away. The street was quiet again, but the silence had changed. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just still. That evening I took down the name tag I had tucked away in the back of the drawer. The one from the wedding. Kitchen liaison, it read in scripted font. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without ceremony, I placed it in the fireplace and lit a match. It curled into ash without protest. Some symbols are only as powerful as the meaning we give them. I chose to let it mean nothing. I sat back in the rocking chair and watched the sun fold itself behind the trees. I did not think about the wedding anymore. I thought about next Sunday, and how the garden might look if we pulled the weeds together. The following week, Lacey came alone. She wore gardening gloves in her back pocket and brought a flat of marigolds in the trunk. Caleb had a work call, she said. But he made you a jar of pickled okra. He said you might like them. I smiled. Tell him I do. We spent the afternoon in the yard, clearing away the thick vines and weeds that had crept through the garden bed. The soil underneath was still rich, still breathing. It just needed attention. Like everything else. Lacey knelt beside me, pulling at roots and brushing her hair from her face with the back of her arm. I forgot how peaceful this could be, she said. You used to make me help when I got in trouble. I nodded. Because the garden does not yell. It teaches. She paused. What did it teach you? I stabbed the trowel into the earth and leaned back. That not everything blooms when you expect it to. And some things come back after you thought they were gone. We planted the marigolds in neat rows along the edge of the bed. Their bright orange heads nodded in the breeze, small but proud. I told her about the time her father built the fence that still stood crooked near the lilac bush. He refused to fix it, I said. Said it reminded him that even good things lean sometimes. She smiled and looked at the slant. I like that. When the sun began to set, we went inside and cleaned the dirt from our hands in the kitchen sink. She opened cabinets without asking, pulling down glasses and pouring lemonade. It felt natural, familiar. After dinner we sat on the porch with our feet propped on the railing. The cicadas had started their summer chorus. The air was thick but kind. I talked to Caleb, she said softly. About the wedding. About you. About how I handled everything. I waited. He asked me if I ever thanked you properly, she said. And I realized I had not. Not really. Not for the house. Or the flowers. Or the years. She looked at me, eyes steady. Thank you, Mom. For giving me more than I ever saw. My throat tightened but I kept my voice even. It was not hard to give. You were easy to love. She leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she had when she was small and sleepy from too much sun. We stayed like that, rocking gently, letting the quiet settle between us without urgency. Later after she left, I walked into the living room and opened the bottom drawer of the old writing desk. Inside was a stack of envelopes I had addressed years ago but never mailed. Letters to Lacey during college, letters I wrote after Robert died, letters I penned when she missed holidays or forgot to call. I had written them not to guilt her, but to remember myself. I pulled the top letter from the stack and unfolded it. The ink was slightly faded, but the words still held weight. No matter how far you go, it said, there will always be a porch light on for you. I placed the letter on the table, then reached for a pen. This time I wrote a new one. Not out of longing, but out of presence, out of peace, out of the simple, beautiful truth that some doors, when left unlocked, do not stay closed forever. The week after, a small envelope arrived in the mail, addressed in Lacey's handwriting. Inside was a photograph and a folded piece of stationery. The photo showed Lacey and Caleb standing in front of the garden bed, holding up the first tomato they had picked, grinning like children. Behind them, the marigolds blazed orange against the green. On the back she had written, "From your soil we grow." The letter was short, just a few lines. Mom, I keep thinking about that crooked fence and how it still stands after all these years. Maybe the things that lean teach us more than the ones that never move. Thank you for being my roots, even when I forgot to water them. Love, Lacey. I placed the photograph on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry, one she had made in third grade art class. It held perfectly. That Sunday they came early, arms full of groceries. We are cooking for you this time, Caleb said, already unloading items onto the counter. Lacey kissed my cheek and pulled out a recipe book from her bag. We are doing it your way. Real food, no shortcuts. I sat at the kitchen table while they moved around the room, bumping elbows and laughing over who chopped onions faster. For once I let myself receive. When we sat down to eat, I looked at the mismatched dishes, the too thick gravy, the slightly overcooked green beans. And I tasted joy. Real unfiltered earned joy. After dinner we walked to the garden. Caleb pointed to a row of tiny green sprouts. Zucchini, he said. We were not sure, but we took a chance. I nodded. Sometimes that is all it takes. The evening light spilled over the yard. The air smelled of basil and soil. I looked at my daughter, her hands dirt-streaked, her heart more open than I had seen in years. She looked back and said, I want you at every table from now on. I did not cry. I just reached for her hand, squeezed it once and held on. We stood there, three people under a softening sky, not perfect, not trying to be, just present. When they left, I lingered in the doorway, watching their car disappear down the road lined with maples turning gold. I stepped back inside and turned off the porch light. Not because it was no longer needed, but because sometimes the ones you wait for finally find their way home before dark.